So I just finished up doing an audiobook and commentary on the book I Do by Freedom Berry for the members channel. And I wanted to share one of the chapters here because it's one of the more practical and less in theory, but more in the practicality of this work. So I think it'll be helpful for most people. Now, if you don't know who Freedom Berry is, he was a student of Neville's, and the story basically goes is that when Freedom moved over to Los Angeles, a friend told him to return a book for him at the library, and on the way, Freedom Berry started reading it, and the book happened to be Your Faith is Your Fortune by Neville. And Freedom Berry really, he fell in love with Neville's work. He saw that Neville was teaching in Los Angeles as well, so he went to go see one of his talks. He asked Neville if he does private teaching, and Neville said no. And then eventually, over time, Neville, must have changed his mind, and he took Freedom in as one of his students, and he started to teach after Neville passed away. So this is one of the books he wrote. I think he wrote maybe 3 or 4 things. I say things, I think 2 of them were books, and I think the other 2 were more maybe just lectures, if I'm not mistaken. But the 2 books he wrote were I Do and Passkey, and I ended up doing an audiobook and commentary on I Do. And this is the second chapter. There's 3 parts, and this is the last part of the second chapter. And just before we start, I just want to say I do one-on-ones. I have a book out as well, and I also do live streaming for members. And if you're interested in any of that, just go to the description. It's all going to be there. But yeah, I do want you to just he's going to speak his own way. He doesn't speak like Neville. He has his own tone. But if you listen carefully to what he's saying, sometimes his way of speaking can be it might just take a few seconds to let it sit in, but I would really recommend you take in what he's saying. It makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I do hope you enjoy this. Thank you. So this is part 2, section C, called The Technique Resurrection by Freedom Berry, and this is his book called I Do, and I'll be giving a commentary at the end. Continue in what you have learned and have become convinced of, because you know those from whom you learned it. 2 Timothy 3:14. The precise technical exercises which I shall recommend for the development of faculty in metaphysical practice have been set forth lucidly in the books of one called Neville, whose personal mystical experiences in the depth of spirit have rendered his acquaintance with that realm as intimate for him as the most commonly accepted appearance for most of us. My gratitude to Neville is immeasurable, for it was he who wisely encouraged me to conduct my own spiritual investigation and speak only from the conclusions of my personal experience would yield. My purpose in urging the use of this technique is to indicate a far more reaching result than merely to witness the evolution of a conceivable desire as it becomes an environmental condition. Beyond the projection of a possibility into time-space appearance, the indulgence in these exercises by the individual effects in him the personal fulfillment of the second of the 3 greatest Christian mysteries, the resurrection. No one can exercise the experiencing faculty without expanding its capacity. The stone of ineptitude is rolled away from the sepulchre of spiritual inactivity only through the individual's consistent discipline. The weakness of the one who repeatedly demands external aid in solving his problems always matures into a stronger weakness, and that one progressively finds himself even more deeply entombed in his prison of helplessness every time he leans on another's efforts. One by one we find ourselves, at the point of individual discovery, immersed in the dream. The illumination which our discovery produces in us begins germinating in the desire to extricate ourselves from the sleepwalking to which our conformity to the dream has accustomed us. But our intention to act decisively soon reveals our feebleness in attempting to adroitly maneuver this tremendous force. Imagination, because it has no external limits, has freely roamed with nothing to constrain its wanderings. If it is to have any direction whatever, that direction must be initiated with a discipline from within. It is in the interest of charting a purposeful course that systems are devised. The pity is that when a mystic visionary provides a set of rules as a temporary aid for the individual in steadying his course, some kind of ecclesiastical group inevitably forges from these rules an iron doctrine to which then seeks to bend the disobedience of a body of unawakened and therefore willing subscribers. Blake clearly exposed this pattern of behavior as one of the eternally conceivable states. In A Vision of the Last Judgment, he writes, "I do not consider either the just or the wicked to be in a supreme state, but to be every one of them states of the sleep which the soul may fall into its deadly dreams of good and evil, when it leaves paradise, following the serpent. Following the dictates of another's ideas must always conclude in a show of tyranny. Here's a quotation from Jerusalem, which indicates that Blake had recognized the necessity of acting only from his own spiritual vision and devising his own rules for guidance. I must create a system or be enslaved by another man's. I will not reason and compare. My business is to create. As an example, no successful concert pianist would expect to use today the same set of technical exercises that was necessary for him in the beginning. At the start, he required those exercises designed to provide him with independence of fingers, flexible wrist, and even touch, and so forth. As his technique developed, the demand was for precision of attack, delineation of phrases, shaping of nuances, and so on. The set of rules had always been adapted to the individual need. In the prodigious operation of resurrecting the being from its dream, no fixed set of rules can be thought to suffice for every encounter. Or to put it another way, one should not attempt to solve cube root problems with the rules governing simple fractions. The individual should draw on his resourcefulness to expand the exercises which will facilitate his deliverance to an even greater need, and continue this way ad infinitum. In 7 steps, I would outline the general fundamentals for a successful development of spiritual prowess and the production of desirable environmental changes. Step 1. Remind yourself that your imagination is the being, the power, against which the most bombastic threat of force is of no moment whatsoever. Step 2. Select from the inexhaustible alphabet of conceivable possibilities the ideal you would like to embody. Step 3. Devise a situation which implies to you that your selection is already a visible condition. Step 4. Imagine yourself is detached from identification with your present environment. Step 5. Abandon yourself to actualizing your selected situation. Step 6. Feel the emotional release that would accompany your experiencing of your ideal in the flesh. Step 7. Intensify and persist in your feeling of actually being this ideal in your outward visible expression. Let me here emphasize that this activity is not a mere picturing process of the mind. Results depend whether or not the individual succeeds in deepening his mental concepts sufficiently to achieve a conviction. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. John 4:24. Worship in the depth of spirit is not accomplished by visualizing mental concepts. Whatever visualizing is permissible in this process of awakening is found in the 3rd step of the outline suggested above. There is nothing of a creative or productive nature in just visualizing. That aspect is a purely mechanical one, the assemblage, before the mind's eye, from the alphabet of imaginable situations, of a scene that implies fulfillment. Visualizing is only the setting of the stage. Nothing but the actual performance of the scene can establish the conviction. There is a cogent scriptorial authority for the use of this technique disclosed in the Gospel according to Matthew. I understand Jesus of Nazareth would be the Word made flesh, the spiritual seer prototype of the embodiment of creativity. We have already discovered the creative being to be imagination. So, in this light, contemplate the deeper meaning of what, on the surface, gives the impression of being merely a simple answer to a question. Then the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And then he answered them, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For to him who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But for him who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables." Matthew 13:10-13. A parable is a little drama with an implied meaning. The finely disciplined attributes of imagination can immediately assume a feeling that a desire is already fulfilled. But the undisciplined attributes do not respond quite so readily. Therefore, imagination enacts the final segment of a situation that implies fulfillment, and in performing that scene, embodies the feeling of fulfillment. The impersonal fashion in which the law of cause and effect operates shows the necessity of changing the feeling of not having or not being to the acute feeling of having or being. For to him who has the conviction of having, will it be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who has not that conviction of having, even what he has will be taken away. One's feeling is outwardly multiplied in identical appearances. Who but to you is capable of feeling in your deepest awareness that a particular situation is so or not? Anyone could feel that a thing is true of you. No one aside from you yourself could feel it in you. The necessity of exercising your own faculties is abundantly clear if you would experience the awakening of the spirit. This is a present necessity, an urgency in which is now upon you. You do not roll away the stone of ignorance in your study of arithmetic by engaging another to solve the problems posed in the examples the textbook offered. The actual indulgence of your faculties in the principle involved eventually made clear, through repeated adaptation, the direction to take each time. Take this technique and apply it to making it the crooked places straight. Whenever a thought impinges on your attention which causes you a sensation that falls short of satisfaction, devise a new meaning for that thought, one that genuinely satisfies, and specifically apply it to the 7 steps of the outline. If you continue using this method, all the while expanding the techniques from those suggested above to fit the conditions at hand, there will come a moment when you will hear a voice from your own depth say with unquestioned authority, "This is the way, walk ye in it." Isaiah 30:21. And you will know surely it refers not only to the direct process of producing results in your environment, but also to the far broader reward of effecting your redemption from the dream. The untold want, by life and land never granted, now voyager, sail thou forth to seek and find. Walt Whitman. Okay, so now this is me talking. This is me coming in quite the mouthful, I will say. But overall, I think it was actually a really good chapter. There are a couple things I want to go over that I found interesting in this chapter. One thing he said in the beginning, which stirs up within the person a hyper sense of responsibility, is that he says, if you are always asking others to solve your problems for you, you just mature into a stronger weakness. And he's really trying to get you to trust in your own imagination entirely for yourself, not for another. And I just made a video recently describing this quote where Blake says, "I must create a system or be enslaved by another man's. I will not reason and compare. My business is to create." To me, I think this quote is one that should be taken very seriously, and I think it can be expanded upon, and it obviously can be contracted to the individual themselves, and it also can be expanded to see the individual, how they fit inside frameworks and systems that they live under. I think that, as I was saying in that video, that we are under many, many systems of that really aren't our own doing. We kind of are born into these systems. But Blake is right that if you don't start to create your own system, or let's just call it system of thought or the system of thinking, if you don't create your own way of dreaming, you just become a part of someone else's dream. That's basically what he's saying in their own way. One thing I found interesting that Freedom Barry said was that he's saying that these techniques are good, and he said Neville laid out a lot of good techniques. But what happens typically is people start to worship the technique, and then they start to create sort of, iron doctrines surrounding these techniques. And they basically lose the point of it all. And the point shouldn't be the technique, but the point should be the technique. I always viewed Neville as, when I would read the 5 lessons, when he gives like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, I always thought that was simply a framework, sort of a stone to walk upon. I never viewed it as the end-all be-all. There are times when you imagine something once and you know it's done. Other times you sort of need some repetition. You need to become more persuaded of it, or you need to completely trust in it. So certain situations demand different types, in my view, of imaginings, and that's something personal. I just noticed there's some things for me, I just have faith that I just know it will happen. And other things I feel this questioning, this doubt in me that I need to work through. And detach myself from. I need to detach myself from the doubt. And, I just found that interesting because you see this a lot in our time, maybe in his time too, that these techniques become the end all be all for people. But in reality, it's your imagination that brought it into being, not the technique. And what he says here is that basically, if you do all these steps, but in the end of it, you don't have any conviction, you didn't do anything. That's what he's saying. He's saying the point, because he's like, basically, if you just follow these steps, you're just a robot. It's just mechanical at this point. If it hasn't moved you into a certain conviction, then it didn't move you at all. You're not convinced of this new thing, being this new thing. And so he said you have to have some type of conviction. That has to be the point. And then he goes on to describe the verse where it says, "He who has, more will be given, and he who does not, even what he has will be taken away." And he inserts in that the one who has is the one who's convicted of having. More will be given to the one who's convicted of having. And like I said, I haven't read this book either. It kind of amazes me that the conclusions I came to on my own with Neville's study were almost word for word the things he came up with as well. When he says here, he says, the impersonal fashion of which the law of cause and effect operates shows the necessity of changing the feeling of not having or not being to the acute feeling of having or being. And I have a video I made it a few years ago, called the law of being and the law of having. I wasn't trying to create a new law or anything. I was just sort of trying to reframe it, because I think a lot of this is just framing, trying to reframe that this is about being, this is about having, this is about fulfillment, walking in a conviction of fulfillment, walking in a conviction of being something, of knowing it. You just know you are. You walk in that knowing. And then he says eventually you get to this point where you hear this voice internally, and it's unquestioned authority. I like that those terms he used. And he says, this is the way, walk this way. And you just do it. You just know it's you're referring to yourself, and you don't need anybody else's approval of it. You just assumed it for yourself, and you accepted it based on your trust in your imagination. And if you go through the steps, he basically says the first step is to feel that your imagination is the being against which all threats or force basically render useless or weak against you. They don't have any power over you. He's basically trying to set up your imagination as this power, and go within this power that's inexhaustible. Find yourself in this. By self, I mean, he didn't say this, but I'm saying this. You want to find yourself. We would call it your desired self, but remove the desired. Try to find yourself in there and become persuaded that you are that thing. Now, he's saying here that simply visualizing it is mechanical. That's not going to produce any conviction or mode or movement, as Neville would call it. That's just simply seeing it and sort of from a distance. He said you want to actually perform, be in the performance of that scene. Now, the question becomes, well, what if you can't see things? In Neville's book, he also mentioned that you could hear them, participate in the hearing of it. So it's actually not as hard as it sounds, because all you have to do is what you would do in the flesh. So if you want to hear your friend tell you good news, the way I would do this is I would just simply hear the good news of them telling me. And I would respond as if it's my first time hearing it. I'm not making this up. I'm sort of trying to lose myself in the imaginal act. I'm not trying to, like, if I'm imagining a friend telling me good news, I'm not secretly thinking in the back of my head, well, I'm causing him to say this. I'm actually playing the part, behind him, the author of this, and he's just saying this because I'm imagining it. I'm not doing any of that. I actually lose myself in it as if it's happening to me, as if it's happening, as if this good news is being told to me. And to me, that is motor movement. That establishes a conviction when you sort of, believe in the reality, as Neville said. Neville says, believe in the reality of your imaginal act. Believe in the reality. So he's not speaking about externalizing things yet. He actually doesn't speak a lot about that, Neville, if you read him carefully. He speaks a lot about becoming convicted, becoming persuaded, believing in the reality. He tells you, just believe in the reality of it. Just keep believing in the reality of it. Trust yourself. Trust it implicitly that it will express, if you want to focus on expression. But it comes down to trusting it and becoming convicted, having self-conviction. That's what he's speaking about. That should be your focus. Your focus really shouldn't be on externalizing. I think someone asked me in the last live stream, do you have to believe that it will externalize? And I said, no, of course not. You don't have to believe that at all. You have to become convicted. The externalization is something that just happens. It doesn't, then if you read it in Power of Your Awareness, Neville says that everything that befalls you, or everything that happens after you assume a state, you don't have free will beyond that. It just befalls you. So there's not much one can do. You kind of have to live. That's why I say you kind of have to have the control off of the world. You see this many, many times. People try to control people. They try to control what people say, what people think. There's a lot of control going on. And it's sort of like whack-a-mole. You kind of, control one mole, another one pops up. You have to whack that one and whack that one. It just keeps going on and on and on. And I'm saying don't even play that game. Just let the world kind of be the way it is, and you be the way you are. Let the world be convicted of what it's convicted of, and you become self-convicted of something that you desire. Become convicted that you are that thing, or become convicted that become convicted of fulfillment instead of doubt, and instead of lack, or instead of loss, or instead of not having. So, like a way to, for me, I kind of apply this slightly differently, but I think of it as, it's like somebody who is stuck in the past. It's like somebody, and I'm guilty of this, but it's like as if you're stuck in the past. Think of somebody who can't seem to overcome their past internally. They feel that the past dictates their future, and so it does. They believe it. They're convicted of this idea that they feel that their past has not allowed them to be free now. And so they're deeply convicted of this idea that because of their past, they can't be free now. But the only way for that person to really know if they can be freed from their past, if their past doesn't have to bind them for the rest of their life, is if they start not by questioning the past or fixing it all up. In my view, I don't think that that's the way to go. The only way to really test this is if you start being completely free. To the best of your ability, you start to walk in absolute faith in your freedom. And you let the past not dictate your freedom now. That's the only way to really know if you can be freed from your past, is if you start being free now. That's the only way I can think of. You have to become the thing that you're seeking. That's the way you find it. That's the only way to find it. And that's really the only way to know. The question is, does my past have to control my life? Does it have to imprison me? Well, that's a question. For me, I was living as if it was already true that it was imprisoning me, right? But let's say I want to be freed from it. What do? Well, I test it. Can I be free in spite of that? Can I be free? Can I assume my ideal regardless of anything? That's the question. Regardless of time, regardless of obstacle, physical dimension, can I assume that I am my ideal now? And when you test it, you see you can. And so if you go back to believing that your past controls you, or you go back to believing that you're not your ideal, then you're believing in a lie, because you just tested you could do it. You're, now that you know you can, you're going back to acting as if you don't know. So that was a mistake I made, was I would discover that I can be free. I can be as free as the wind, but then I'd allow myself to go back because I became convinced again that I couldn't be free. Just like that dream that I had. But the truth is that I could be free regardless of anything. Regardless of any circumstance, I could be free. And to me, the unquestioned authority, that voice internally, for me, it didn't necessarily say this is the way you walk it, but it did sort of feel, I guess I felt it today, and I just knew with 100% certainty that I could never really know something. I will never really know freedom or understand freedom. I never really will until I assume I am that thing. And if I really want to know it, I have to assume I am that thing. Well, regardless of consequences, I have to do it. If I really want to know that state, the thing I desire, if I really want to know the thing I desire, I have to assume that I am that thing. There's no other way to know. I won't know by speculating or by fantasizing or by wondering. I will only know until I'm convicted of being that thing, and I'll start to experience it. Until then, it just remains sort of a unproductive fancy. For it to be productive, you sort of have to assume. You have to assume it to be the case. And yeah, I mean, this was an incredible chapter. I mean, so far this book has just been pretty eye-opening, and actually I think it's going to get better. The next part three is called The Product, and he kind of gives different. Looks like he talks about pitfalls, and it seems like he talks about the problems that can come with this type of work and what you might find yourself falling into. So I think this is just going to be, overall, this book is just going to be, I think, extremely helpful. I know it's kind of a dry, hard read, but that's the reason why I kind of add my commentary. But overall, I think that if you take it slow and you kind of feel what's being said, I think you can get a lot out of this book. And I think that his point of conviction is absolutely spot on. I think he's 100% correct on that. I think without conviction, you can't really be moved into behaving differently. You can't really be moved into feeling differently about yourself, or into really believing in or naturally thinking differently unless you're convicted. If you could see that right now what you're being is something you were persuaded or convicted by, then you can see that's all you really have to do to be something else. So yeah, I mean, yeah, what a great chapter. I do hope that this has been helpful, and I hope you're getting a lot out of this book, because I know I am. But again, thank you guys for listening. Be ready for part 3.